Imagine a love so grand you'd gamble your entire future on it, only to watch it shatter before your eyes live on every media outlet in the country. Amelia West believed she had found her soulmate in Joshua Harrington, the brilliant millionaire whose magnetism pulled her away from a promising career. She threw her heart, her dreams, and her entire life into his hands. But what happens when devotion backfires and the man you trust stabs you in the back for another woman tonight? We unravel a story of betrayal, regret, and redemption. Buckle up, this is the untold saga that captivated the entire nation. Amelia West had always believed in serendipity, the wondrous chance encounters that could alter one's fate in the blink of an eye. Growing up in a modest family in rural Ohio, she had dreamed of bigger horizons, the kind of shimmering cityscapes she saw on postcards and glossy travel magazines. Those reveries led her to New York City at age 21, fresh out of college with an economics degree and a restless heart full of ambition. She was determined to make her mark in the bustling financial world of Manhattan. For Amelia, each morning in New York was a brand new page of possibility. After months of persistent networking, late-night study sessions, and near-endless job applications, she landed an entry-level position at a well-regarded investment firm on Wall Street. The hours were punishing the competition fierce, but her determination never wavered. In her mind, it was only a matter of time before the world recognized her talent. Then came the philanthropic gala, hosted by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation at the Plaza Hotel, a glittering affair that combined high society, cutting-edge technology, and philanthropic causes. Amelia had scored an invitation through her firm, assigned to mingle with potential donors and represent a fresh face among the more seasoned financiers. That night, the city's skyline glowed like a beacon of promises made and soon to be kept. In the opulent ballroom with crystal chandeliers and the soft hum of champagne flutes, Amelia's eyes drifted across the crowd. Celebrities, entrepreneurs, and billionaires converged, forming clusters of conversation and strategic alliances. She had never felt more out of place or more determined to prove she belonged. Little did she know that the trajectory of her entire life was about to change. Near a small group discussing eco-conscious business ventures stood a tall, dark-haired man with an effortless air of confidence. Amelia had read about him in Forbes and recognized him instantly, Joshua Harrington, the relatively young millionaire who had built a tech and real estate empire, revered for his uncanny ability to predict market trends and transform failing startups into gold mines. He was charismatic, whip-smart, and rumored to possess impeccable instincts, both in business and in reading people. When Amelia finally mustered the courage to introduce herself, she felt the overwhelming gravity of his presence. Joshua's intense, dark eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, everything else seemed to fade into the background. A conversation sparked, a simple greeting turned into a spirited debate about the future of renewable energy, then morphed into a discussion of the philanthropic responsibilities of the ultra-wealthy. Hours slipped by as they stood in that gilded space, forging an immediate, almost electric connection. At the end of the evening, he asked for her number. Within days, rumors swirled around the office. Amelia West had caught the eye of the unstoppable Joshua Harrington. Although their initial interactions remained strictly professional emails, swapped about potential business collaborations, there was an undercurrent of chemistry between them that neither tried to hide. She found herself waiting impatiently for his messages, rereading them for hidden subtext, daydreaming about what it would be like to stand by his side. Little did she know that those daydreams would soon become her reality. But that reality would come at a greater cost than she could ever have imagined. Their first official date took place at the Blue Hill restaurant in Greenwich Village, famed for its farm-to-table offerings and hushed, intimate atmosphere. From the moment they sat down, conversation flowed effortlessly, two minds dancing between ambition and personal ideals. Joshua was enamored by Amelia's genuine spirit and her refusal to feign ignorance just to flatter him. She, in turn, was dazzled by his keen intellect and the sense of possibility that seemed to hover around him like an aura. Yet in the weeks that followed, it became evident that a relationship with Joshua Harrington came with its own set of challenges. He was constantly traveling from Hong Kong to Dubai, forging deals and scouting properties. Even when stationed in New York, he was buried under mountains of work, juggling an ever-expanding empire that included a technology startup incubator, a chain of luxury hotels, and a burgeoning philanthropic foundation. Still, Amelia found herself charmed by his unpredictable schedule. The stolen weekends in Paris, last-minute escapes to his mansion in the Hamptons, everything felt like a whirlwind of glamour and excitement. The paparazzi occasionally snapped photos of them, fueling gossip columns with headlines about Joshua's mysterious new love interest. But for the most part, Amelia remained blissfully oblivious to the intense public scrutiny a relationship of such high profile would invite. Her bosses at the investment firm, however, were less than thrilled by the attention. While they enjoyed her connections to a big player like Joshua, they began to question her focus. Whispers circulated that Amelia was no longer all in on the job. Amid a sea of ambitious bankers who lived for the next big commission, Amelia had another life, one entangled with lavish getaways and philanthropic events. Her firm's leadership doubted whether she was fit to handle their biggest, most sensitive accounts. As Amelia navigated the mounting pressure at work, Joshua made a proposition that both thrilled and terrified her. He wanted her to consider leaving her firm to join his newly formed philanthropic foundation as a strategic advisor, working directly alongside Joshua in shaping the future of philanthropic endeavors, held undeniable appeal. She would have the opportunity to help funnel millions, maybe billions, toward causes she cared deeply about: education, clean water, and sustainable technology for developing regions. To her parents and close friends, Joshua's offer sounded too good to pass up. Yet Amelia could not ignore the inner voice that warned her she was gambling her own burgeoning career. Accepting this position meant forfeiting the professional identity she'd been building at the investment firm. Would she be seen as just Joshua Harrington's girlfriend, a figurehead on the board of his foundation, or would she truly have the autonomy and influence to make a difference? But love, in all its intoxicating power, often sweeps reason aside. Joshua's sincerity convinced her that they were meant to be partners in every sense. And so after many sleepless nights and many heart-to-heart talks, Amelia made the fateful decision to resign from her job and place her faith in Joshua's vision. She stepped into the world of philanthropy as the new executive director of the Harrington Global Initiative. It was a giant leap of faith, propelled by her unwavering belief in him. No sooner had she signed the foundation's employment contract than the work began. Amelia's day-to-day schedule shifted drastically, gone, with the cutthroat negotiations on Wall Street replaced by planning sessions for clean water wells in sub-Saharan Africa, scholarship programs for underprivileged youth, and relief efforts in disaster-prone regions. The philanthropic domain opened her eyes to global crises she had only skimmed on the surface before. But life with Joshua also expanded in ways she hadn't anticipated. The press, intrigued by the romance and the rumored power couple's philanthropic ventures, placed them in a glaring spotlight. They appeared in sleek magazines, posed for glitzy photos at fundraising galas, and were even interviewed by Anderson Cooper in a segment on young philanthropists shaping the modern world. Such media attention both thrilled and unnerved Amelia. She sensed her identity becoming increasingly interwoven with Joshua's. Small decisions like whether to wear a bold-colored gown to a gala suddenly held disproportionate weight. If she spoke too strongly during a public forum, some speculated that she was overshadowing Joshua. If she remained too silent, they assumed she was nothing more than his trophy girlfriend. Despite these pressures, Amelia was determined to excel. She dove headfirst into the foundation's work, spending nights constructing comprehensive strategies for distributing funds and forging alliances with grassroots organizations. Her vision for long-term sustainability and impact caught the attention of world leaders and non-profits. She was respected and admired, yet the question persisted, would her success ever stand on its own merit, separate from Joshua? Her relationship with him was equally complex. Joshua, though supportive, began to show signs of restlessness. Their travel schedules rarely aligned, and half the time they were either on separate continents or lost in their own projects. When they were together, the world outside seemed irrelevant, yet each moment was fleeting. Still, Amelia consoled herself with the belief that true love required hard work and sacrifice. She even parted ways with several old friends who viewed her lifestyle as unrelatable, forging new friendships with the wealthy circles that Joshua inhabited. By all appearances, she was molding her life around his with the unwavering hope that someday they would walk hand in hand without the turbulence of billion-dollar deals swirling around them. She believed that for someone like Joshua, building an empire came first, but that eventually he would shift his focus more toward home. She couldn't have been more wrong. A single snapshot, a fleeting interaction, would eventually shatter her illusions and cast her into a whirlwind of heartbreak and public humiliation. The first inkling that something was amiss came in the form of hushed gossip. A colleague in the Foundation's HR department cautiously mentioned seeing Joshua with a stunning blonde at a private event in Miami. Initially, Amelia brushed off the comment. Joshua was constantly meeting influential people, and networking was the lifeblood of his business. She dismissed it as part of his routine corporate engagements. But then more unsettling tidbits surfaced. One evening at a social function, an acquaintance from her Wall Street days softly inquired, "How do you feel about Joshua's new business partner, Camilla Stone?" The woman delivered the question with a knowing, almost pitying tilt of the head. Amelia felt a stab of anxiety, but again she tried to wave it away. "I'm not worried," she replied, forcing a confident smile. "Camilla is just another investor, right?" That's what Joshua had mentioned. Camilla Stone was a venture capitalist rumored to be the next big thing in Silicon Valley. But the rumors didn't stop. They circled her like carrion birds, waiting to feast on a wounded heart. Word on the street was that Camilla boasted not only a fortune of her own, but also an edgy charisma that could light up a room. She had launched multiple successful startups before the age of 30, cultivated an impressive network of high-profile friends, and moved through the socialite scene with fearless ease. Amelia started to see Camilla's face splashed across entrepreneurial magazines, and more concerning, linked to Joshua's philanthropic events. Yet no amount of gnawing suspicion prepared Amelia for the images that surfaced on a gossip website. The pictures showed Joshua and Camilla entering a yacht party in St. Bart's, arm in arm, relaxed and alarmingly intimate. The date on the photos was from 2 weeks prior, when Joshua had claimed to be in Hong Kong for urgent business meetings. Amelia's heart seized with an impossible ache. Everything she feared was plastered there for the world to see: her partner, the man she had rearranged her life for on a tropical island, with another woman. The next morning, tabloids splashed the images with salacious headlines: "Billionaire's Double Life" and "Joshua Harrington's New Flame Founder of TechBuzz Inc." Seeking clarity, she confronted Joshua. With no small measure of desperation, Amelia hoped for a plausible explanation. Maybe this was a business arrangement that the media had spun out of context. Initially, Joshua Shu tried to smooth things over. He brushed off her concerns, insisting it was purely professional. "Camilla is just an investor," he repeated, maintaining eye contact. "You know the press, they twist everything to sell copies." Amelia tried to believe him. After all, Joshua had once been her dream, made real, the man who had encouraged her to pursue philanthropic endeavors with full gusto. However, a tiny voice in the back of her mind refused to quiet. The more she studied his face, the subtle twitch of his jaw, the fleeting guilt in his eyes, the more she sensed a deeper betrayal. She prayed she was wrong, but a chill settled over her, a harbinger of the unraveling that would soon come. A few agonizing weeks passed. Amelia and Joshua maintained a precarious facade, interacting with carefully measured politeness and ignoring the question looming between them. Work at the Harrington Global Initiative became her anchor. It was the one place she felt she could still pour her energy and accomplish something meaningful. Meanwhile, Joshua was often away, citing expansions in Europe and new technology ventures in Asia. Every night, Amelia fell asleep, wondering whether he was on a plane alone or with Camilla Stone. It wasn't until an industry conference in San Francisco that the truth finally hit her like a crushing blow. Amelia had flown out to represent the foundation on a panel about ethical investing. Arriving a day early, she decided to surprise Joshua, who was rumored to be in the city sealing a partnership for a high-tech real estate development. She had no illusions of a romantic getaway. She merely wanted to look him in the eyes and feel anything reassuring. Through a series of quick calls to Joshua's assistant, Amelia learned he was hosting a private event at a boutique hotel downtown. Gaining entrance was easy enough for someone recognized as Joshua Harrington's partner and head of his foundation. Amelia slipped through the ornate doors into a dimly lit lounge, scanning the clusters of well-heeled guests. She found him in the corner laughing, with an all-too-familiar blonde by his side. Camilla Stone perched intimately close, her hand on his shoulder, as they whispered to each other. For a moment, Amelia just stood there, heartbreak twisting her stomach into knots. She watched the way Camilla gazed at him with obvious devotion, how Joshua's smile reached his eyes in a way it rarely did anymore when he was with her. She must have made some involuntary sound, because suddenly Joshua turned, and their eyes locked. His expression morphed, from carefree laughter to shock, then guilt. Camilla, noticing his reaction, followed his gaze to Amelia. An instant hush fell around them, as curious onlookers sensed a confrontation was imminent. Amelia felt her composure falter. With shaky resolve, she stepped forward. "So this is the real reason you've been traveling so much," she said, voice low, but shaking with hurt. Joshua stammered, searching for words, while Camilla stood like a cat ready to pounce, calculating, silent, a smirk curling at the corner of her lips. Any illusions Amelia had nurtured about Joshua's innocence evaporated at that moment. She turned to leave, tears burning in her eyes. The next few seconds played out in a blur, Joshua grabbing her wrist to stop her, a swirl of hotel security stepping in to calm the situation and the buzz of phones capturing images that would soon flood social media. But none of that registered fully. All Amelia could feel was heartbreak, a crushing sense that she had given up everything, her career, her identity, and now had nothing left. Amelia's flight back to New York the next morning felt surreal. Her phone pinged incessantly with messages from friends and acquaintances who had seen or heard about the confrontation in San Francisco. She ignored them all, dreading the prospect of reliving the humiliating scene for anyone else's curiosity. Dark clouds of shame loomed over her as she replayed the painful realization that her sacrifice had amounted to betrayal. Upon returning to Manhattan, she tried to bury herself in work. But the foundation's atmosphere had changed. Everyone wore strained smiles, tiptoeing around the fiasco that had become headline news. The tabloids were relentless. Harrington's two-timing tangle read one front page, accompanied by photos of Amelia's anguished face, alongside a glamorous shot of Camilla Stone. Some opinion pieces went further, speculating on how Amelia had sacrificed her rising career on Wall Street only to be cast aside. Amid the scandal, Joshua remained elusive. He reached out via text messages and voicemails, each time spouting half-baked excuses and apologies. He claimed he never intended to hurt Amelia, that everything had gotten out of control, that Camilla was a momentary lapse in judgment. "I do love you," he insisted. "We can fix this." But each hollow plea felt like salt in Amelia's wounds. When local news anchors began reporting the story, Amelia snapped. She packed a small bag and fled to her parents' home in Ohio. She needed the familiar comfort of childhood walls, away from the glare of Manhattan's scrutiny. It was there in her old bedroom, filled with faded posters and battered textbooks, that she grappled with her swirling emotions: rage, humiliation, heartbreak, and a stubborn sliver of lingering love for the man who had shattered her trust. Days stretched into weeks as she avoided the public eye. She rarely scrolled through social media or news sites, fearful of the next sensational rumor. The Harrington Global Initiative reached out multiple times, gently urging her to resume her post. But Amelia couldn't imagine stepping foot back into that environment. The foundation now felt like a constant reminder of what she had lost. Her parents, Harold and Martha West, offered solace. They reminded her of her achievements before Joshua entered the picture, that she had thrived on Wall Street through her own merits. Over countless cups of tea, they tried to rekindle her self-belief. But healing from betrayal was a painful process. Every step forward seemed haunted by memories of how quickly love had turned into deceit. Meanwhile, in the glitzy corridors of high society, Joshua's credibility took a hit. For years, he had been lauded as a forward-thinking entrepreneur with a golden touch. Now, the public learned he was as fallible as any other tabloid figure. While the business community still respected his acumen, some philanthropic circles began distancing themselves. Nobody wanted their carefully curated image tainted by association with a scandal that had become nightly fodder on entertainment news. Camilla Stone, for her part, seemed to revel in the publicity at first. She posted social media updates from lavish locales, Bali, Santorini, Dubai, often tagging Joshua or hinting at their romantic escapades. However, her approach soon backfired. Investors in her ventures grew uneasy with the spotlight, and a few key partners pulled out of major deals, citing reputational concerns. A wave of negative press cast her as a homewrecker with questionable loyalty, overshadowing her professional accomplishments. It wasn't long before cracks formed in Joshua and Camilla's relationship. Their union, founded on secrecy and adrenaline, could not endure the harsh glare of public disdain. Rumors swirled that they fought constantly over finances, business strategies, and the unrelenting paparazzi. Amid the friction, Joshua's once unassailable aura of composure began to slip. By the time he tried to address the scandal publicly, many had already turned against him. He called for a press conference, ostensibly to discuss a new community development project in Brooklyn, but reporters quickly hijacked the event with pointed questions about Amelia and Camilla. Joshua, flustered and uneasy, stumbled through a meandering statement. He expressed regret, but offered no direct apology to Amelia. Instead, he tried to pivot to the philanthropic work he was continuing as though his personal transgressions were trivial detours. The press was ruthless. Harrington ducks accountability, and billionaire dodges questions about betrayed fiancé became trending headlines. Even mainstream media, typically polite to wealthy sponsors, criticized his lack of genuine remorse. Joshua's previously unshakable brand took a beating, affecting everything from new venture funding to PR alliances. Investors grew cautious, uncertain if associating with him was now more liability than asset. All the while, Amelia watched from Ohio quietly, her anger mixed with satisfaction at seeing the man who had betrayed her forced to confront the consequences. Yet she did not relish his downfall. Even in her anger, she couldn't forget the Joshua who once inspired her, who had supported her philanthropic dreams. That memory weighed heavily on her heart, alongside the heartbreak and humiliation he had inflicted. Gradually, Amelia found solace in small things: morning jogs through her hometown streets, quiet dinners with her parents, and hours spent reading novels she had neglected during her high-octane life in New York. One day, while flipping through her old college notebooks, she rediscovered a business plan she had once sketched out: a consulting firm dedicated to social impact investments. She had envisioned combining the rigor of financial analysis with ethical frameworks, guiding organizations to invest in ventures that brought sustainable benefits to communities. As the idea rekindled in her mind, she felt a surge of excitement, a spark of the ambitious drive that had once burned so brightly. The plan needed updates, of course, to reflect the current world, but the blueprint for something meaningful was there. And in that moment, she realized a fundamental truth. She didn't need Joshua Harrington to fulfill her dreams. She had the skills, the passion, and enough connections in the philanthropic and financial spheres to launch something on her own. Over the next few weeks, she reconnected with old mentors from Wall Street, scheduling calls and virtual coffee chats to gather advice. She also reached out to a few philanthropic contacts she'd met during her tenure at the Harrington Global Initiative, people who admired her work ethic and believed in her vision. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive. A few were still concerned about any lingering negativity tied to her name through Joshua, but Amelia stood firm in clarifying that she had parted ways personally and professionally. Buoyed by this positive reception, Amelia moved back to New York City with a renewed sense of purpose. She rented a modest apartment in Brooklyn and set up a small office in a co-working space, determined to bootstrap her new firm without leaning on the Harrington fortune. Every day, she poured herself into shaping the structure and mission of what she called Western Comely Impact Advisors. As she built her brand, she remained cautious, still bearing the emotional scars of Joshua's betrayal. Romance was the last thing on her mind. Instead, she channeled all her energy into forging a life that was entirely her own. She was guided not by heartbreak, but by a newfound conviction that independence was the most valuable treasure she could possess. Just as Amelia began to find her footing, the media came calling once again. The scandal surrounding Joshua and Camilla had escalated to new heights, fueled by revelations that Camilla was suspected of insider trading in one of her startups. Rumors circulated that Joshua was implicated, given his ties to her ventures. Journalists from all corners of the globe sought Amelia for her perspective, hoping to unearth yet another sensational angle, the scorned woman's revenge, as one reporter crassly put it. Amelia initially ignored their requests, wanting no part in the circus. But then she received a surprising invitation. A respected investigative journalist, Maria Contreras, asked to feature Amelia in a televised segment titled "Women Rebuilding Their Lives After Public Betrayal." The segment aimed to explore how high-profile breakups affected women who had given up parts of themselves in the process. Instead of a gossip piece, it was pitched as a platform to discuss resilience, empowerment, and personal growth. After careful deliberation, Amelia agreed. She saw an opportunity to address not only her own journey, but also to highlight her burgeoning consulting firm and its social impact goals. She wanted the narrative to shift from pity to progress, from heartbreak to hope. On the day of filming, Amelia arrived at the studio with a calm determination. Styled in a simple, elegant navy suit, she took a seat under the bright studio lights. Maria Contreras welcomed her warmly and asked thoughtful questions about her leap from finance to philanthropy, about what it felt like to stand by Joshua Harrington's side, and about the moment she discovered his affair. Amelia spoke candidly, voice cracking a little, when she recounted the betrayal in San Francisco. But she didn't dwell on the pain. Instead, she highlighted the lessons she'd learned, the importance of maintaining one's own identity in a relationship, the danger of becoming too intertwined with a partner's ambitions, and the resilience one can find in adversity. She deftly pivoted the conversation to West and Comedy Impact Advisors, explaining how she planned to guide socially conscious investors to make more ethical, high-return investments. The interview concluded with a powerful message. Sometimes the greatest heartbreak can become the catalyst for your most significant breakthrough. By the time the cameras turned off, Maria Contreras looked visibly moved. Amelia left the studio feeling lighter, as though she had finally taken control of her narrative. In the days following Amelia's interview, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Women and men from around the world sent messages of support, sharing their own stories of betrayal and reinvention. Donations to philanthropic causes Amelia had championed saw a sudden uptick, and West & Cohen received a surge of inquiries from potential clients eager to align with her mission. However, the public wasn't done with the Joshua Harrington saga just yet. Shortly after Amelia's segment aired, a scandal erupted. Camilla Stone was officially charged with securities fraud. Evidence suggested she had exploited confidential information gained from her intimate relationship with Joshua to manipulate stock prices. Though the extent of Joshua's involvement remained unclear, his association with Camilla tarnished his image further. Investors in his ventures clamored for explanations, and legal experts speculated on potential lawsuits and penalties. In this maelstrom, Joshua found himself near rock bottom. Many of his partnerships imploded, and a few of his luxury properties sat half-completed, starved of funds. It wasn't just the money that stung. For a man fueled by pride and public adoration, the whiplash from hero to pariah was excruciating. Rumor had it he was under extraordinary stress, suffering panic attacks and sleepless nights. For the first time in his life, Joshua Harrington could not talk or buy his way out of a crisis. One fateful morning, he decided to grant an exclusive interview to a major television network. Dressed in a subdued grey suit, a stark contrast to his usual flamboyance, he sat across from a seasoned journalist who did not mince words. Over the course of the interview, Joshua was grilled on his role in Camilla's crimes, his foundation's financial status, and inevitably his personal failings with Amelia. To the astonishment of viewers, Joshua did something few expected. He broke down on camera. His voice trembled as he admitted his guilt in betraying Amelia. "I had it all," he said, words heavy with regret. "And I threw it away for a fling, something that meant nothing compared to what Amelia gave me. She was the most genuine person I ever knew. And I betrayed her, not just personally, but also by making her question her own worth." Reporters seized on this moment of raw emotion. He went on to acknowledge that Amelia had sacrificed her career for him, that she had put her trust in his vision. Tears glistened in his eyes, whether genuine or a strategic move to salvage public opinion. No one could be entirely sure. But for a brief moment, Joshua Harrington's gilded veneer cracked, revealing a man whose regret seemed soul deep. Joshua's interview aired on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, Amelia's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text after text, call after call from friends, former colleagues, distant relatives, even strangers who had followed her story. Everyone wanted to know, had she seen it? What did she think? Would she forgive him? Would she take him back? The video was everywhere, clipped, remixed, dissected. Joshua Harrington, once untouchable, once the shining face of tech-driven philanthropy, had broken down on national television. His voice had cracked, his composure had shattered, and for a fleeting moment the world had glimpsed a man weighed down by the consequences of his own choices. I had everything he had said, tears shimmering in his eyes, and I lost the one person who actually believed in me, not for what I owned, but for who I could be. I broke something beautiful. It was the kind of moment that divided public opinion. Some saw a man finally taking accountability. Others saw a calculated attempt at damage control. News anchors debated it. Social media was ablaze with hashtags. Team Amelia trended globally for 3 days, but Amelia, in her Brooklyn apartment, remained still. She hadn't watched the interview live. She had been in a client meeting outlining a sustainability investment roadmap for an East African infrastructure firm. Her assistant had gently nudged her afterward. "You'll want to see this," she'd said, sliding over her phone. Amelia watched the clip later that evening, alone, curled on the corner of her couch with a blanket pulled to her chin. She braced herself for more spin, more spectacle, but what she saw instead was different. Joshua looked broken, not just embarrassed, but emptied. The man on screen bore little resemblance to the arrogant figure who had once laughed beside Camilla Stone in a hotel bar. He seemed smaller now, his eyes darker, his voice stripped of swagger, and yet Amelia couldn't ignore the weight of what he was saying. "I thought I could have it all," he admitted. "The woman who grounded me, and the woman who thrilled me. I thought I could juggle both, and no one would get hurt. I was wrong." Amelia didn't just walk away, she reclaimed herself. "And I don't know if I'll ever earn her respect again." When the segment ended, Amelia sat frozen. Not in heartbreak, but in the strange, quiet space that follows a truth long overdue. She didn't cry. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt tired. The next day, the press hounded her team for comment. News outlets sent email after email requesting interviews, panel appearances, reactions. "How do you respond to Joshua's apology?" they asked. "Is there a future for you two? What's your next move?" Her assistant entered her office with a sympathetic glance. They want a statement. Amelia looked up from her desk, where spreadsheets and vision statements for West & Co. lay in neat piles. Her fingers paused on a proposal for a water equity project in South America. She closed the file, exhaled, and said, "They already got one." "You're sure I don't need to respond to someone else's reckoning?" she said. "I already did my own. That chapter is closed." But deep down, there was still a question she hadn't answered for herself, not for the media, not for the world. Did she forgive him? It was hard to say. Forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was a process. A painful, slow unraveling of grief and disappointment until only acceptance remained. She didn't know if she had reached that final point yet. But she knew one thing: she didn't owe anyone an answer, and she certainly didn't owe Joshua a return. Amelia picked up her pen and returned to her proposal, the soft hum of the city rising outside her window. Her life, her work, her peace. It was all hers again. Whatever the world decided to make of Joshua's tears, that was no longer her burden. Amelia had read Joshua's handwritten letter 3 times. It sat on her kitchen counter like a relic from another life. Its creases worn, the ink slightly smudged at the edges from her fingertips. He hadn't typed, it hadn't dictated it to an assistant. It was messy, unfiltered, and painfully honest. In it, Joshua apologized, not in the sterile language of PR consultants or the performative sorrow of his televised breakdown, but with raw, unvarnished words that felt real. He confessed to losing himself in the pursuit of image, to neglecting the one person who had stood beside him without expectation. He asked not for forgiveness, but for a chance to say goodbye properly. "You don't owe me anything," he wrote, "but I owe you the truth and the respect I failed to show you when it mattered most." Amelia sat with the letter for 2 days before she made a decision. Closure wasn't for him, it was for her. And maybe, just maybe, meeting him face to face would allow her to finally lay the last pieces of her heartbreak to rest. She chose a quiet cafe near Central Park, one of the first places they had visited early in their relationship. Not the extravagant bistros or 5-star rooftops that came later, but a small, warm corner of the city where people went to be real. When she arrived, Joshua was already there, seated in the back, nervously stirring a cup of black coffee. He looked different, thinner, slightly disheveled eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. He stood, as she approached his mouth, twitching into a faint, tentative smile. "Hi, Amelia." She nodded, her face unreadable. "Hi." They sat. For a moment, there was only silence. The distant clink of ceramic cups. The hum of soft jazz. Amelia's heart pounded, not from hope or anger, but from the sheer gravity of finally facing the man who had changed the course of her life. Joshua broke the silence first. "You look strong." Amelia tilted her head. "I am." He swallowed hard. "I don't know where to start." "You already did," she replied. "In the letter." He nodded. "I meant every word." "I believe you," she said quietly. "But believing you doesn't undo what happened." "I know." His voice cracked slightly. "Camilla was a mistake. Not just the affair. The way I treated it as something I could compartmentalize. I thought I could have both worlds, and I ended up destroying both." Amelia studied him. She could see the remorse etched into the lines around his eyes. For a brief moment, she remembered the early days, their shared goals, the passion behind every project, the way he had once looked at her like she was his compass. That man felt like a ghost now. "You didn't just betray me, Joshua," she said gently. "You made me doubt myself. You made me question everything I gave up for us. He bowed his head. I know. That's the part I regret the most. A pause passed between them, waited, but not hostile. I never stopped believing in your vision, she continued. Even when you stopped believing in me. That's what hurt the most. I didn't want the spotlight, Joshua. I just wanted to build something with you, something meaningful. I didn't deserve that kind of loyalty, he admitted. I took your love for granted. I told myself you'd always be there, even as I drifted further away. Amelia looked down at her tea, then back up at him. I don't hate you. I did for a while. I hated the way you made me feel disposable. But hate is heavy, and I've carried enough. Joshua's eyes welled. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted the chance to tell you how sorry I am, to say thank you for believing in me when no one else did, for giving me the best version of myself, even if I didn't know how to hold on to it. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. You had that version. You lost it. That's on you. They sat in silence again, both understanding that this was the last time they'd ever sit across from one another like this. When Amelia stood, Joshua followed suit. Can I ask one thing? He said, his voice tentative. What do you think, one day? You'll be okay with the part I played in your story? She considered the question for a moment, then replied with quiet finality, I already am, because I'm writing the rest of it myself. With that, she turned and walked out, the door's bell tinkling softly behind her. As she stepped into the chill air, the sun broke through the clouds overhead. It was a small thing, a moment of light, but it was hers. She didn't look back. The days that followed Amelia's final meeting with Joshua were heavy with reflection, but not regret. She had closed a door that once held her hostage, and though it ached, the lock had turned with finality. Back in her Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by minimal furniture and soft light, Amelia sat by the window and watched the sun rise over the city skyline. For the first time in months, she felt still, present, entirely her own. It hadn't been easy getting here. Every stage of heartbreak had chipped away at her until she could barely recognize herself. But through the pain and public scandal, Amelia had discovered something far more precious than closure: clarity. The world had seen her cry, it had seen her fall. But now it would see her rise, not because she wanted vengeance, but because she had finally remembered who she was. Western Cumble Impact Advisors was no longer a quiet project whispered about during sleepless nights. It had become a real entity, alive with ambition and vision. Amelia had hired a small but passionate team, each person hand-picked, not only for their skills, but for their integrity. They worked from a modest co-working space in Dumbo, powered by coffee conviction, and the belief that capitalism could have a conscience. Amelia poured herself into the firm's mission, helping high-net-worth individuals and institutions invest in ventures that made a tangible difference. Renewable energy, women-led startups, education in underserved communities. Her work began drawing attention not because of her past, but because of the future she was creating. Clients who once hesitated to be associated with a woman embroiled in scandal were now eager to align with her brand. The world saw her not as a footnote in Joshua Harrington's downfall, but as a founder in her own right. But success didn't erase memory. Some mornings, she still woke up from dreams of Paris rooftops and champagne laughter. She still remembered the version of Joshua that made her believe in forever. The man who talked about changing the world and almost convinced her they would do it together. But memory, she learned, doesn't require permission to fade. Over time, it simply stops hurting. Her public image had evolved too. After her poised interview on Maria Contreras' show, messages poured in from women around the world. They shared stories of being left overlooked, forgotten, only to rise stronger, clearer, unshakable. "You made me believe in starting over," one woman wrote. Another said, "You reminded me that heartbreak isn't the end. It's the beginning of my own story." Amelia saved every message, and yet amid the praise and progress, she kept her personal life fiercely private. Dating was no longer about filling a void. It was about connection, presence, and mutual respect. She had coffee with a kind-hearted professor once, dinner with a sustainability architect another time. But she never rushed. She didn't need someone to complete her. She was already whole. Meanwhile, Joshua faded further into the background. After his teary television apology and Camilla's legal scandal, he all but disappeared from the spotlight. Reports surfaced of him selling off assets, quietly dissolving several of his ventures. Some said he'd gone to India for a spiritual retreat. Others claimed he was rebuilding, this time slowly, with more humility. Amelia didn't follow the updates. She wished him peace from afar, but he no longer occupied space in her life. His chapter had ended not with fury, but with understanding. He was a lesson, not a home. One crisp autumn afternoon, Amelia received an email that stopped her mid-sentence. It was from the World Economic Forum. They were curating a global summit in Geneva focused on ethical leadership and sustainable finance, and they wanted Amelia West to be a keynote speaker. She reread the message 3 times. This summit was the very stage she once imagined standing on with Joshua, back when she thought success meant walking side by side with him into a world shaped by their shared dreams. Now she would walk onto that stage alone, not as someone's plus one, but as a name that carried weight all by itself. A month later, she stepped off a plane in Switzerland, wearing a navy blue coat and her signature quiet confidence. Geneva greeted her with snow-dusted rooftops and the hum of high-level dialogue. She joined panels, spoke on impact metrics and ESG investing, and met thought leaders who treated her as an equal, not as a woman with a scandal behind her, but as a visionary leading her field. The final evening of the summit brought a gala. Soft jazz filled the air, and candlelight flickered across white linen. As Amelia sipped her drink by the window, a fellow delegate approached an admired social impact investor she had long respected. "I've followed your work," he said, with a smile. "You're not just building a firm. You're changing the standard." Amelia thanked him heart-brimming, not with pride, but with peace. That night, as she looked out at the lights of Geneva, reflecting in the lake, she whispered a quiet promise to herself: "Never again will I shrink to fit someone else's world." She had found her own light, and this time she intended to shine in it unapologetically, irrevocably, completely. Time moved forward quietly but steadily. The media had moved on to fresher scandals, and the name Amelia West began appearing in a new context, not as the heartbroken woman scorned by a billionaire, but as a rising star in the world of ethical finance and social impact leadership. West and Coble Impact Advisors, once a hopeful startup, scribbled in the margins of a college notebook, had matured into a global force. The firm now operated from hubs in New York, London, and Singapore, advising major clients on how to invest with both purpose and profitability. What set Amelia apart wasn't just her resilience, it was the clarity of her mission. She didn't chase revenge or sympathy. She chased solutions, and the world noticed. Her story, what the press once salivated over, had become background noise. When reporters occasionally asked about her past with Joshua Harrington, she responded with grace. It was a chapter I learned a lot from, but it's not the whole book. And that was the truth. Amelia had become more than a woman who endured betrayal. She had become a voice on stages, at global investment summits, at TEDx talks, in front of graduate students eager to find their own path. She spoke not only about rebuilding after heartbreak, but also about aligning capital with conscience. Her message was clear: money can do harm, or it can change lives. The difference lies in how we use it. Every time she stood behind a microphone or led a client strategy session, she wasn't casting shadows from a broken past. She was standing fully in her own light. And yet there were moments when memory crept in uninvited. A quiet evening alone, a familiar song, the rustle of a news article mentioning Joshua Harrington's name. She'd hear he was working on small-scale ventures, now avoiding media attention. Some said he was humbler. Others said he was broken. She didn't know which version to believe, and she no longer cared to. In her private life, Amelia kept things simple. She found joy in morning walks through Prospect Park dinners with longtime friends and the gentle unfolding of new relationships one's built not on whirlwind glamour, but on honesty, shared values, and mutual respect. She was in no rush to love again. She had already fallen for someone much more important herself. That was the real victory, not the applause, not the headlines, not the business accolades, but the quiet knowledge that she had reclaimed her voice. She had once given up everything for love, her job, her independence, her sense of self. And she had lost, spectacularly. But she had risen from those ashes not as someone merely surviving, but as someone thriving. A woman redefined by her own terms, guided not by a man's shadow, but by her own inner fire. And that was more than enough. Amelia West's story reminds us that even the most crushing betrayals can lead to groundbreaking transformations. She turned heartbreak into a catalyst for growth, proving that one moment of shattered trust does not spell the end of the road. Through resilience and self-belief, she forged a new identity, one that stood independently of the man who once eclipsed her every dream. Today, Amelia inspires thousands to pursue ethical investments and create real, lasting impact in communities worldwide. If this real-life drama moved you, please take a moment to support our channel. Like this video if you believe in the power of second chances. Share it with friends who need a reminder that hope exists even in the darkest times. And subscribe for more gripping stories of resilience and reinvention. Together we can shine a light on human triumph and the unstoppable spirit within each of us. Your journey is just beginning, so stay with us and keep believing.